coming today. I'm so glad you could make it. This is the fourth of 5 lectures for our 2025 lecture series, adult lecture series. There is a youth lecture series in the summer. And I am pleased to introduce Sal Manna. Sal Manna. He's a journalist, he's an author, and a historian. He's written just an extraordinary number of books on local history. The most recent is Barking Up the Big Trees, which is a book about historic dogs in Calaveras County. I'm so glad that he could join us. He is the president and founder of the Society for the Preservation of West Calaveras. And it's just so wonderful to welcome a member of the history community here to share his information with all of us. So thank you for coming, and thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and thanks for coming. I always appreciate it. Hope I'm not blocking anybody here. So that's a New Yorker cartoon that someone sent me. And clearly the situation is the writer, remember typewriters? Anyway, there's a writer there, perplexed about what to do. Right? All these dogs, right? And his wife walks out and goes, "Write about dogs." So I've had Australian Shepherd dogs for over 25 years. Almost all of them are working trial champions. We do stock dog herding, cattle, sheep, etc. That's my late dog Yogi. He was a stock dog champion, which was the highest you can get. And that's the front of my house. And had a little sign there that says, "The day God made dogs, he just sat down and smiled." So when I came here, 2003, started to research history. Along the way, when I came across in a newspaper a story about dogs, particularly the 19th century, or photos, I would put it in a folder. Well, finally, after 20 some odd years, a few months ago, I decided it was time to put the book together. But at that point, I'm going, gosh, how many really good photographs of, pre-1920 dogs would I be able to find? How many good stories? Would someone buy maybe a 150-page book? Then I started to delve into the archives here. Before long, I was seeing dogs in every historical photograph. And I struggled to keep the book under 300 pages. There are over 350 photographs in the book, and all but one of them has a dog in them. Oops, hold on. That was the wrong one. Okay. There you go. That's one of the earliest ones. That's circa 1860s, and that's Banaji Raspberry of Angels Camp. Okay. So Indiana-born William Ellis Lowe and older sister Helen Jane Lowe arrived in Calaveras County with their parents, William and Jane, in 1851 or 1852. And these are circa 1860 ambrotypes in a gold-plated union case. And they are among the earliest in county history, just as photographs, and certainly among the earliest to depict a dog. And obviously they switched the dog for each photograph. These are descendants of the first inhabitants of Calaveras County, had a special, even spiritual connection with dogs. And here are members of the native Miwok tribe. That's Pedro and Lily O'Connor. And that's Moke Hill, circa 1930s. Now, if you're wondering about the title of the book, the groves of giant sequoias in Calaveras were one of California's earliest tourist attractions. Their renown spreading across the globe beginning in 1852. Of course, people who came to witness the majesty of the largest living trees on earth often brought their dogs with them, as they would visiting any park. Now, regulations regarding dogs have changed. Today, dogs are not allowed in the groves or on any trail therein. But back then, you could bring your dog. So here are 3 men, a dog, and a big tree. This tree, I found out later, after the book was published, is named for poet William Cullen Bryant, and it's circa 1900. And there's a whole series of photographs of the big trees and dogs, and so that prompted the title. Beautiful photograph. I'm sorry to be repetitive about that, but every now and then I'm just going to say that's just a great photograph. Now, there are also, different chapters in the book that specialize in certain things. So, there's a chapter about hunting dogs. This was an amazing find. The family gave me this photo. This is brothers Bill and George Ward of Paloma, 1895, and their dogs, and rifle. An article, July 6th, 1895, in the Calaveras Prospect. Last Saturday, George Ward, a young man of about 12 years of age, living at the Gwynn Mine, was out in company with Oscar Gale, another lad of about the same age, shooting birds. They had one shotgun between them. Young Ward carried the gun, while Gale was to carry the game, and it would seem at the start, from our own personal experience, that the latter had the best of the bargain, which, however, proved different before the day's sport was ended. When about 2 miles west of the Gwynn Mine, near the McCulney River, their dog was heard to bark as if it had something treed. Going to the spot and peering up into a pine tree under which the dog was barking, they espied a large California lion. Ward cut loose at it with his shotgun, loaded with fine bird shot, and kept on shooting until the supply of ammunition was exhausted. But bombardment did not seem to affect the lion in the least. Leaving their dog to stand guard and keep the animal in the tree, the boys went back to the Gwynn Mine for reinforcements. They secured the assistance of Frank Mercer, who, with a double-barrel shotgun loaded with buckshot, repaired with them to the spot where the dog still kept the feline in the tree. One charge of the coarser shot was too much for the animal, and it jumped down and started to run, closely pursued by the dog. After a chase of half a mile, the dog overtook the lion. The boys were soon on the scene, and after a desperate battle, the gritty boys and equally spunky dog succeeded in killing the animal. It was a female, measuring 8 feet from tip to tip, and weighed more than Gale agreed to carry. The dog in the story is almost certainly one of those in this photograph. What was not noted in the article was that George, on the right, was born without a right hand, and he covered it up in his photograph. It is so rare to have a photograph of action and an article about that same action, but we have one. Now, the most famous lion hunter in California was a guy named Jay Bruce. For nearly 30 years, from 1919 to 1946, Jay Cook Bruce and his dogs hunted mountain lions for the state of California. The first official state lion hunter for the Fish and Game Commission, he dispatched mountain lions, quote, in the interest of preserving and increasing deer and domestic livestock. The most successful lion hunter in state history, Bruce claimed 669 kills, approximately 40 of them in Calaveras County, from West Point to Dorrington to Avery. During one hunt in 1924, his dogs treed a lion who decided to leap down onto one of them. And this is from his autobiography. The panther sprang toward Eli. I fired. The cat crumpled in midair and landed half limp with a shattered spine and rolled downhill, biting and clawing at everything within reach of his jaws and forepaws. The dog pack closed in. Duke got the first hold on the stricken cat's throat, while the other dogs attacked the rear. I barged into the melee as the master killer gripped Duke between his 2 forepaws, armed with 10 sharp claws nearly 2 inches long. The hound held on. The cat flipped him over endwise, thus bringing the dog's thigh into his mouth and spoiling my chance for a headshot. Duke let go as the lion socked 4 teeth through his thigh muscle. Pushing the revolver muzzle against the lion's scalp, I fired. The cat's jaw clamped tight as his muscles went rigid. Duke howled and tugged. Shoving the gun barrel between the lion's jaws, I forced them apart to release Duke. Still game, the hound, with blood streaming from his wounds, wobbled back to attack the quivering body. In September 1938, Spike, who'd been part of Bruce's pack for 7 years, treed 8 cougars in just 1 week. But the strain of the hunt was wearing on him. Bruce wrote in tribute, "It must have been grit alone that kept him going until the last cat was treed. For after the job was finished, he collapsed and had to be carried a half-mile to our pickup truck, where he lay limp until we reached camp. Making a bed of pine needles, I lifted his body and placed it gently on the bed. A few minutes later, he uttered a groan of agony and his body went rigid. Another painful pal of mine had come to the end of the trail." Hunting, for the most part, was about deer hunting. Now, this is the Gardella house in McComney Hill, circa 1910. It's left to right, brothers Joe and Louis Gardella, Steve Cuneo, Gardella brother Jean-Baptiste, and Joseph's son Abner Cyril. What I tried to do throughout the book is identify everybody I could, many times including the names of dogs, which I thought would have been impossible. And when possible, who the photographer was. So rather than leave that information out, it's all in the captions. Now, after the book has come out, other photos have popped up. So I'm going to show you a photo that's not in the book. So that is Bert Zimmerman at right, and that is younger brother Elmer at left, and that's Campo Seco, 1911. And one reason I did not use that was because I could not identify the people in it and be 99% sure that it was in fact Calaveras County. This is the first book anywhere to be about dogs in a county. No one's ever done this or tried to do it or been crazy enough to try to do it. Of course, there were bird dogs too. This is Wade Hampton Johnston at Lower Calaveras in 1914. Johnston arrived in Calaveras in 1855, and in a 1920s recollection to his daughter Effie, he recalled his dog Yancey. And he wrote, "I think it was in 1861 that my brother Charles got Yancey as a puppy. He was one of a litter of 8 whose mother belonged to Mrs. Judge Badgley of McComney Hill. All of this litter were given or sold to the miners around here. They were bird dogs, and all made good dogs. Charles had to whip Yancey for running chickens. He used to set tap holes and run his nose clean down into the mud. When Charles went over to Nevada in '63, he left Yancey with me. Yancey was well trained. He wouldn't mash a quail, and you could leave your game sack with him. People around town used to like to take Yancey out hunting. One man took him out one day, fired 3 or 4 times, and Yancey couldn't find anything. Finally, Yancey just sat down in front of him and commenced barking. So he threw his gun over his shoulder and came home. He said, Yancey was just making fun of me. I couldn't stand that." Also probably bird hunting. These are the DeMartini brothers with Peter, Clement, Richard, Andrew, and Lewis, believed to be in this group, and this is Valley Springs, circa early 1900s. Along with hunting dogs are herding dogs. This is an Australian shepherd working at El Rancho Grande in 1949. John Hospital was a proud Basque. Soon after, the 24-year-old arrived in New York in 1893, headed to California, where younger brother Jean had settled 2 years earlier. While driving herds of thousands of sheep back and forth from the Los Baños area to summer pastures in the Sierras, Hospital took note of where the sheep preferred to graze, the rolling grasslands straddling San Joaquin and Calaveras counties. And the shepherd, whose father had also been a shepherd, dreamed of one day having his own ranch. His own sheep helped fund land purchases, which began in 1917. Eventually, his holdings encompassed more than 4,500 contiguous acres, sitting in both San Joaquin and Calaveras. His property, which he called El Rancho Grande, grazed upwards of 15,000 sheep. The annual summer sojourn from the hot, sparse flatlands to the pastures of the cooler high country above Sonora in Tuolumne County was a 2-week trip through Salt Spring Valley in Calaveras, stopping at camps and ranches along the way. The sheep would be split into bands of 1,500 head, with one shepherd in charge of each band. But he was not alone. Each was accompanied by 2 dogs, Australian shepherds. So this is at El Rancho Grande. That's left to right. Well, no, actually it's not. It's John Hospital, the older man in the middle, grandson John Musto, and sons Pete and Jack Hospital. This is 1949. I don't identify very many breeds in the book because that's a tenuous thing to do, because it's hard to tell from a still photograph sometimes what the dog might be, particularly when you're going back this far. But I do know the lineage of the Australian Shepherds. So those are identified. There's a lot of other dogs, particularly herding dogs, that you'll notice that are, I call them proto-Aussies, or maybe Aussies. So Hospital's grandson, John, remembers that a shepherd would simply whistle to send the dogs to gather the sheep from corrals constructed of chaparral brush. The only job left to the shepherd was to close the gates after them. Dominic, one of their Basque herdsmen, teamed with an Aussie female named Rosie, who he would work using commands in his native language. In the late 1930s, sheep were still being moved on foot before the widespread use of trucks. But they would be driven down the same roads used by the automobiles. So this is what John said. He said, when the shepherd saw a car coming, he would send the dogs through the middle of the sheep, pushing them to the side of the road, and the car would follow the dogs through. These are not herding dogs. These are pets, family pets. And Jess McKay of Angels Camp taught his dogs, Bugs and Joe, to sit up and beg in 1919. I'm sorry, that is so cool. 1919, and someone takes like a really cool photo of their dogs. And you can teach it to ride on the back of a horse. This is brothers Forrest and Warren Epperson in Milton in 1914. There's shockingly, a whole series of photos of dogs on the back of horses. I guess it was a thing. And when it happened, it was so extraordinary, apparently, that everyone took a photo of it. So photographing dogs with children has always been popular, and there are a lot in the book. This is the Fisk family of Murphys, who documented a lot of their dogs with their children, and this is their photo circa 1930s. Just take that in. This is Angels Camp born Charles Edward Stone with mother Maria Hansen and father Eric Jansen, who's also known as Edward Stone, about 1900. And kudos to the photographer who successfully included their pet goat. And again, shockingly, there are a number of photos I came across of dogs and goats. I didn't know that was a particular thing, but apparently they get along very well. So this is John Pirano Lemieux of Angels Camp and his cousin Hazel Pirano. And this was taken by photographer Joshua Porter Austin in 1891. So when they went to take their rare studio photograph of their child, they brought the family dog and took photos with it. So remember the baby, John Lemieux? That's him, age 2. It's taken by Dwayne Dow of Angels Camp in 1893 with the same dog as that previous photo, though the dog appears far more distressed this time around. Yeah, right.
Can you back up one? I just wondered about that setting, because it looks like a barn, a door of a barn or a cabin. Behind that, it looks like a granite wall or something.
No, it's a backdrop.
Just from a professional photographer.
Yeah, it's just a screen. So this is Inez Harriet Thomas. This was also taken by Dwayne Dow in Angels Camp, circa 1894. And again, the quality of this photograph, 1894, just stunned me, and how many there were that were this good. So that is Ed Leonard of San Andreas, who grew up to be a school teacher and local historian, and that's circa 1892. So in 1909, the San Francisco Call newspaper announced the winners of a contest held among Northern California elementary schools for the best stories penned about a dog. And one was from Calaveras County. This is 1909. So the story title is The Accident of My Dog Jumbo by William Breen, Milton Grammar School, Milton, 6th grade, age 11 years. I have a dog named Jumbo. One day a crowd of us folk went down the Calaveras River where the dredge was running. We got to throwing sticks into the river. He went after a stick too close to the dredge, and its suction was so strong that it drew him under it. He went under one side of it and out the other, and went down the river till he came to a couple of stumps and climbed up on them and rested. Then he attempted to swim the swift river. When he got through, he was so tired that he could hardly walk. He is my pet. I don't think I could get along without him. He will hitch up in a cart and pull a little baby named Doris Donner. I have a picture of him hitched up and the baby in the cart. And this is that photo. So that's Jumbo and Doris Donner, 1909. You've heard of a boy and his dog. Here's 6-year-old Bill Messer and his dog amid the crowd, bidding farewell to World War I draftees, leaving the Valley Springs train depot, October 7th, 1917. I've said that, as far as I'm concerned, this is probably the most patriotic photo ever taken in Calaveras County. I mean, how much more you can get? You got the flag, people going off to war, people greeting them, a boy and his dog. What more do you want?
Apple pie.
Yeah. This is the Calaveras High School student body, San Andreas, 1913. And they've got a dog. They take the school photo and they bring the dog. And here are girls in their dog. This is the Bret Hart High School girls baseball team, Angels Camp, 1925. And everyone is identified in the book caption too. And of course, they have their dog. I tell you, after a while, I'm looking at, hundreds and hundreds of photos, and I'm seeing dogs everywhere. And occasionally, though, I'll see a little black spot and think it's a dog, and then realize it's just a black spot or a stump or something. It's because I'm just seeing it all the time.
Would Ina Batten be in that photo?
Could be. I don't remember offhand, but we could check in the. Another stunning photo. This is reportedly, not guaranteed, but San Andreas and Moke Hills, Emily Ellen Fry Whirl, October 1877. Yeah, isn't it? Just amazing.
They both have the same look on their face.
So, Mrs. Ethel Adams of Murphy's, shown here in the late 1880s, was very fond of animals, especially dogs, 4 of whom always slept in her room. She was called a fearless and skillful rider and driver. Mrs. Adams was the only woman to ride with the cowboys, who collected cattle in Angels Camp, Vallecito, Douglas Flat, and Murphy's, before driving them up to the high country to the summer ranges. She would herd the cattle to her Adams Camp on Disaster Creek, below Highland Lakes in Alpine County every year, and return them in the fall. So this is her in the snow at her Table Mountain Ranch house, circa 1915. And of course, as some of you know, that Table Mountain Ranch is Judith Marvin's. So the dog loving has continued there as well. And Mrs. Adams, she would often dress up her dogs for various festivities and events. So this was a fundraiser for the Red Cross in 1916 for World War I. And that dog's name is Mew, M-U. And Judith was kind enough to lend me her album of photographs, and so many of them had dogs in them. So dogs have always been part of our communities, such as in Angels Camp. So this is the Calaveras Hotel, circa 1890. That's Charlie Roleri with the dog at the right. His mother, Olivia Antonin Roleri, is next to the lamppost, and sister Louise beside her, and Tilly Lager-Marcino is the girl in front. And here's Main Street, Angels Camp, circa 1900. I don't think those are pets. I think those are hunting dogs. Those are working dogs. I had a catch-all chapter about dogs in communities, and the title is something like, "Dogs, They Are Ubiquitous." They are everywhere. Here's one of the most fascinating photos in the book. So, born in Sheep Ranch, Edith Irvine began taking photographs in her early teens, creating a dark room in a rear corner of her family home in Moke Hill. On April 8, 1906, the 22-year-old happened to be in San Francisco in time to photograph the aftermath of the great earthquake and fire. Those astonishing images, most of them unexamined until the 21st century, have cemented her legacy as a pioneer female photographer, though one whose career was unfortunately short. So Irvine is third from the right, and she's holding her right hand behind her back. Anyone know why? She's depressing the switch to activate the camera. Right? And the dog, of course, has its back to the camera. A problematic situation familiar to dog photographers to this day. Great, you know, all this work, I got my hand behind, I'm flipping a switch, and the dog isn't even facing forward. So people brought their dogs to work, too. So here's the woodcutter crew from the Royal Mine. That's Jack Maltos with his dog, and this was taken in Hodson around 1900. Of all the work situations, mining had the least number of photographs with dogs, I think for obvious reasons. They'd more get in the way as opposed to, a forestry crew or some other, work. Livery stables always had dogs, for example. It's near Felix. That's why I did that. Near Milton, Salt Spring Valley, that corner. They brought them to work, and they brought them to play. So this was taken by Alan Harris Peak of the Photographer's Peak in Lago Marcino in Moke Hill circa 1900. This is John Epperson's saloon during an election campaign in Milton in 1892. So you're taking a group photo in 1907 in San Andreas in front of the old courthouse building of county officials. And there's a dog too. Sometimes they were even in the courthouse. So there's an article in the Stockton Record, May 6, 1941, titled, "Faithful Dog Adopts Judge, Follows Him to Court Daily." Tip, a 10-year-old dog who adopted Superior Court Judge and Mrs. J.A. Smith of San Andreas 4 years ago, owns the unique distinction of having attended court sessions every day his master is presiding. For 3 years, Tip, a remarkably good-natured cross between a collie and a German police dog, has faithfully accompanied Judge Smith to court sessions, occupying a special place under the judge's large desk. During particularly long trials, Tip will manage 1 or 2 get-acquainted tours around the courtroom, visiting for a second or two every court official, attorney, jury member, and even the spectators. He is remarkably well-behaved and has never once been reprimanded by Judge Smith for unnecessary noise or contempt of court. Particularly fond of being petted, Tip has even learned how to smile. Pulling his lips up into a regular grin whenever he is pleased. And undoubtedly, in the quiet comfort of his hangout under Judge Smith's desk, Tip has had many occasions to sneak in a quiet grin or two during his courtroom days. So family photos, of course, include the family dog. So this is the Haddock family in Wallace in 1895. The Haddock children, Frank and the future celebrated artist Arthur Earl Haddock is in front, and that dog is named Romeo. This is John and Pauline Battenfield with their Whittle family grandchildren, and that's Harry holding the dog. And this is at Malonis around 1912. Shh, no cats. So Connecticut-born Louis Sammis arrived in Wallace in 1916 and established the Roccabella olive growing and processing operation. The brand, seen on grocery shelves across America into the 1960s, became one of the best known to ever emanate from Calaveras. And many of his family photos, which I had the opportunity to scan, included his favorite dogs. So this is Sammis and Wallace, circa 1920. Does anybody know who this dog is? Okay. This is a dog, another family dog, that's close to someone connected to where we stand. Museum director Martin Hubbardy. This is Teddy. This is the Hubbardy family dog, circa 1920s. So I'm going to show you two family photos not in the book. And they're not in the book because I could not identify them. They were both taken from the archives of the Historical Society or the county archives. How they're connected here, I'm not sure, therefore they're not in the book. However, clearly an early pioneer photo. And I just love the faces of this entire family in front of their tent and with their dog. So I've kept the photo. It's not in the book because I'm not sure it's Calaveras. but I think it's a great photo, as is that one. I mean, it must have been the generation immediately before, the generation that was here, but I cannot be sure. So what about old men and dogs? Well, that's Perry Lamb on the right, unidentified man on the left, and this is Valley Springs, 1910. And just to show how those studio photographs you saw where everything was so clear, and this being a, amateur candid photo, and, the dogs are moving, so they're blurry. I expected to find a lot of that kind of photo where it was kind of blurry, amateurish, not quite, and was amazed to find so many that were absolutely clear. So speaking of old men and dogs, I call this old men and an old dog. So left to right, that's Thomas A. Wilson, Serafino Rufino, Pete LeGros, John Giles, John Bardsley, and Jimmy Bennett. And that's West Point, 1910. Which brings us to the latter 20th century. Does anyone know the story behind this 1973 photograph? No. Shh. Put your hand down, Judith. She knows everything. Anyone else? So that is Maggie Lee, and she is our most famous dog. Or, as Rolling Stone magazine wrote, the celebrated shitting dog of Calaveras County. Okay, so this is a story. So basically what happened in late 1972 was that Maggie Lee, who was the family dog of the Herd family, H-E-R-D, shit in a vegetable garden of a neighbor. Well, the neighbor happened to be the judge, Judge Blewett. Judge Blewett charged the owner, Roger Herd, with a crime, for which Roger Herd would have to show up in court in front of the same judge who had filed the complaint. Yeah, that was a problem. Rolling Stone magazine picked up on this. Now, we're talking the era of Watergate, Richard Nixon, etc., and blew this up. This story went around the world. The BBC picked up this. This was, if you remember the old size Rolling Stone magazine, so we're not little, 4 pages of this. The writer, by the way, is Joe Esterhazy, who became a famous screenwriter. He wrote Flashdance and some other movies. So this was one of his journalism pieces. It became a big thing about abuse of power. And Calaveras, being the small county it is, with a limited number of, how can I put it, competent people. Roger Herd shows up to court with his lawyer. His lawyer is an Arola, who happened to be county counsel at the same time. So he took off. He's the lawyer for the county, but he's also a private attorney, and he shows up in court as a private attorney for Roger Herd. The night before, the Board of Supervisors decided to change the law quietly, so that it just became a misdemeanor that could be paid by a fine and not jail time. And Maggie Lee was released back to its owner. How famous was she? There was a legal defense fund established. There was a song written about her. And when she died at about 11 years old. Her obituary was in all the newspapers.
What year did you say?
1973 was the article, and the event happened in December of 72.
That article says that that judge was a convicted game law violator.
As a youngster, when he was a little bit younger.
Oh, well, they just
Well,
put that in there. Though.
well, it also, what happened too was it changed California law. This dog story changed California law because Judge Blewett had no legal training. He owned the cafe. So it became a law that you had to, I think it was something, you had to either be an attorney registered to serve the state of California, or you had to be grandfathered in by having 10 years of judge experience. But he had absolutely no legal training whatsoever. So it changed, that story changed California law.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah. And this, and I apologize to, to the herds, but calling it the celebrated shitting dog of Calaveras County. But that's what they did.
Did this story run in the Calaveras, California, or the
There's a whole series of stories while these events were happening. There's many other things. Enterprise sent out a photographer to take a picture of Judge Blewett in his cafe. Judge Blewett didn't like that, and he slugged him. There was contempt of court. Actually, the only lawyer involved was actually the publisher of the Enterprise, was actually a retired lawyer from San Francisco who knew the law better than Judge Blewett did. And when he wrote an editorial about how nefarious this whole situation was, Judge Blewett charged him with contempt of court. Supposedly, it was the first and only case, it never went through, it was the first and only case of a judge charging contempt of court against a newspaper. So it became suddenly a free speech press issue. It just blew up.
Wow.
Yeah. All right, the last one I'll show here is my favorite. And it's actually the back of the book. That's Joshua Lilly, Valley Springs, 1900. Just a combination of good-looking guy, great-looking horse, great-looking dog with him. I mean, it's the...
first, the guy or the dog?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But that just seems like the perfect rural Calaveras, dog photo. So, as a journalist and historian, when I see a vintage portrait of a person, I always wonder about that person's life, about, what he or she felt, its ancestors, its descendants, what's going on. And it's the same when I see a dog in a vintage photo. Just almost like what you were saying. It's like I wonder what Joshua Lilly, his life. I wonder about his life. But I also wonder about the dog too. And that dog's descendants and where it came from and all of that. Back in the day, when you're reading these early newspapers, and a dog was stolen or poisoned or shot or bought or whatever, they often referred to the dog as a valuable dog, which is a really curious phrase that you don't hear anymore, but it was always mentioned. And it's obviously, as far as I'm concerned, all dogs are valuable. And that's what I hope to show with Barking Up the Big Trees. So, thank you.